Sonic has always been defined by his ability to stick out from the crowd. From everything to his gameplay to his visuals, everything Sonic does is defined by style. From lush, cartoony visuals to a style more reminiscent of 90s pop art, and even something as extreme as dark, gritty realism. So I'm going to take a look back at the many different styles the Sonic series has taken over the years, to both give my opinion and more importantly, examine just how an art style can represent an entire game. So, let's start from the beginning, shall we? And just to clarify, this is not a video explaining why games look the way they do in the Sonic series, but instead I'm going to be covering every single game I feel has a distinct artistic look and how I believe they perfectly represent the game that they're attached to. So, the style of Sonic 1 is quite safe in its execution. The standout is obviously Green Hill Zone, with its almost pop-out art aesthetic. 90s art began to experience a huge influx of graffiti and subsequent inspiration from said graffiti. Bold outlines, clashing and complementary colors, rigid and soft patterns. This pop-out style had it all. And this is best seen in the design of Green Hill Zone. The trees as well as other design aspects of the game's landscape show that rigid design off, but the smooth momentum-based hills were all about carrying those soft edges. Sonic himself being a soft-edged hero, the enemies carried that cutesy design, but the metallic edge lended them an air of menace. But overall, Sonic 1 is the safest we'll be seeing here, as the visual identity of the game is it's extremely safe. Those design aspects I mentioned are present, but not so much at the forefront, and a blocky, basic, even static-looking game permeates throughout basically all the other stages. And that's how I feel Sonic 1 is viewed in the modern era. It's a safe, blocky game, but nonetheless sets a very solid foundation of things to come. And now it's time for the obligatory praise of Sonic 2. Sonic 2 was such a fantastic game in all ways you can think, and is still probably a better kisser than you are. So, let's take a look at the game's artwork. A perfect evolution in all ways, Sonic 2 takes the bright, borderline neon colors from the original and makes them mainstay in the color palette. It ditches the more realistic, in massive quotes there, colors and themes of the original and goes wild. Every zone has a better set of colors that allows objects and landscapes to stand out and be more clearly defined. Its lean into a more cartoonish look is best seen in the enemy designs, I feel. You won't ever see anything cuter than coconuts, and, love 'em or hate 'em, we've got the Slicers, which is one of the most cartoonish critters I've ever seen. Sonic's sprite has been made a bit brighter in its blue, and with more expressive idle animations to boot, he looks a lot better here. And Tails really leans into the fantasy with his, well, two tails. I know Sonic's a hedgehog that goes fast, but Tails is a straight-up mutant. His two tails give him a more distinct presence and silhouette, and the orange is great with Sonic's blue. Sonic 2's art style is very much an extension of the first game's best qualities, and that's why this art style is so perfect for Sonic 2. It takes all of the best aspects of the original, fleshes them out, and even further cements Sonic 2 as a perfect sequel. Sonic 3 and Knuckles is where things really get amped up. All that cartoonishness from Sonic 1 and 2 are borderline gone here, I want to say. Every level in Sonic 3 doesn't go for that pop art aesthetic, instead trying to make every section of Angel Island look as natural and realistic as you can get in a 16-bit setting. The lush natural jungles, the cold isolated ice cap, and especially the Death Egg show just how this game was meant to be a big finale. A huge evolution for the series, where it goes away from its simple roots and into a more serious world filled with depth and nuance. For instance, look at the new sprites. This is in fact my favorite design for Sonic from the Mega Drive/Genesis era. His new look reminds me a bit of a prototype Adventure Sonic, where he looks a bit bigger, a bit tougher, and overall a little more stubborn and strong. I attribute most of this to his facial expressions and attitude in his idle animations. Knuckles is the same for me, less cartoony and more serious. Let me explain that when I say I believe things look less cartoony, I mean mainly that they still look like cartoony characters, but you are supposed to take them seriously. You see Mickey Mouse and you see a cartoon character who will always end up fine. He's silly, funny Mickey Mouse. But the Sonic series and so many of the games that we'll be taking a look at, they always fight that stereotype. Sonic is supposed to be taken seriously in Sonic 3, and its art style in both character designs and environmental designs showcase this beauty. And this exact look was carried into Sonic's big leap into 3D. With Sonic Adventure. Sonic Adventure, similar to Sonic 2, took the mainline game beforehand and evolved the art style to perfection. The Adventure art style is arguably the most iconic in the series, and also where things finally start getting really interesting with promotional artwork. In Sonic Adventure, we have a heaping helping of promotional material that showcases the characters and what they're all about. Sonic wasn't much of a character in the original trilogy. Heck, all the developers really needed to worry about was a cool-looking character with a couple catchy character traits. But things have evolved since then. After the PlayStation and even the SNES had its huge story-driven RPGs, Sega now had the task of showcasing multiple characters and what they're all about on top of the game's overall tone with this new art style. And that's how we got this look we know and love today. Eye colors to add a sense of life to these existing characters, longer proportions that symbolize the maturity of the gang and Sonic Adventure's overall themes. The looseness of the characters and hyper-exaggerated poses make you understand on the simplest levels this game was extreme, it was exaggerated, and it was everything you wanted from a more mature Sonic title. And these same sentiments carried into Sonic Adventure 2. Although the poses are less exaggerated, the art style was the same at its core, and because of this lessened exaggeration, the in-game models more closely resemble the promotional material for Sonic Adventure 2. The Adventure era artwork perfectly captured the identity of its time. It was an evolution of what came before, and was more mature and stylized than ever, taking Sonic to his extreme, and it was amazing. So far, Sega had something going with the classics to Adventure 2. The classic era had an appealing streamlined look that showed off these characters and the game's fundamentals. It was a great way to sell a simple platformer, and brand recognition carried the largely unchanging look of the promo art all the way through 3 and K. The Adventure art did the exact same for its era. It promised a more mature styled Sonic with more character and action than had ever been seen, and it did this primarily through excellent promo art of character portraits, and the in-game graphics matched this look as best as it could on the hardware. But here's where we get to Sonic Heroes. Sonic Heroes art style is a strange thing indeed. Its promotional art is now 3D renders instead of the amazing art that had preceded it, and in that change, it also came with slight redesigns. The characters were given slightly different proportions in terms of limb thickness and overall body size, not to mention the plastic sheen that now took the place of the more natural lighting of the first Adventure titles. The realism was entirely gone, instead being the first real attempt at a classic Sonic look in a 3D space, and I believe that is perfect for what Heroes was trying to be. Heroes was a back-to-basics approach, and perhaps the revamped, more simple looks for the characters is what represents that change. It was a visual way to indicate that Sonic was changing, taking a break from the serious world around him and instead going back to his roots and the cartooniness of old. The lack of seriousness was this game's direction, and in that, it undoubtedly succeeds in its art style. That being said, I'm not a huge fan of the new way that the characters look, but I am a huge fan of the art direction for the levels themselves and the world. They are an excellent match of both wacky classic concepts meeting adventure textured realism, and it's a fantastic look for the series. And then Shadow, well, it went and confused everything. See, in Shadow the Hedgehog, the game changed everything. It took the darkest elements of SA2 and substantially darkened the color palette to nothing but dark grays and usually a green or purple. The issue with the style of this game is that it doesn't do enough to make you take the Sonic character seriously. Aside from the obvious lack of a well-written narrative, the visuals don't do the game any favors. The promotional artwork is absolutely fantastic. These are easily some of the best renders the series has ever seen. Shadow looks great. The technicality behind it, the lighting, all of it looks so fantastic, and the fact that it still holds up to this day is amazing. But as for the in-game visual identity, well, remember how Sega tried really hard to make the Sonic characters look appealing and mature? Well, they succeeded in the adventure games because the world matched the characters even if it was based on reality. They may have been cartoonish characters, but they were ones who looked real enough to have real stakes and character. In Shadow the Hedgehog, however, the characters just reused the Sonic Heroes assets. They were cartoonish and shiny, so to put those characters in that visual identity into this dark, exaggerated Michael Bay-esque world, it clashes so hard. And because of this, the visual identity of Shadow the Hedgehog is a conflicted one that does not mesh with its characters and world, and thus puts on full display how dumb the game is. Regardless of what you think of the quality of the concept or overall execution of the adventure titles, at least the visual identity always was consistent. It lended itself naturally to having the Sonic characters in the stories that they were in. Shadow the Hedgehog does not. Instead of blurring the line between Sonic and seriousness, it instead puts up a huge dividing wall, showing the distinct contrast and still expects players to treat it like an adventure game, which simply doesn't work with this visual identity. This leads the player to believe that Shadow the Hedgehog is a confused game, and in many respects it is, and the visual identity does nothing to help its case. And in our next game, well, it has a very distinct visual identity. 06 realized the mistakes Shadow made in its art style, but unfortunately didn't do enough to blur the line between Sonic and reality, and instead just made it a little more fuzzy. See, at least in previous 3D titles, humans were low poly enough not to look realistic or straight up went for anime character designs, but in 06 we got hyper-realism. That hyperrealism is present in the Sonic cast of characters redesigns as well. The cast is more humanly proportioned. You can see with Sonic he almost has shoulders and a pelvis, and his quills are substantially bigger than normal for the believability factor that he can actually curl into a ball. That's why this is one of my favorite Sonic designs ever, because he looks so practical, so serious, and well proportioned in my eyes that although I understand entirely why it's not everyone's cup of tea, I personally have always enjoyed this look. But this art style of hyperrealism is exactly what defines Sonic 06, a head-to-toe reboot, to be more real, more next-gen, a brand new identity for Sonic going forward, and that's exactly what 06 tried to be in its world design as well. Real-world inspired locations, lush jungles, and the spring items look more mechanical to be less out of place even. And that's exactly why I love a lot of what 06 has to offer. Love it or hate it, the identity of Sonic 06 is largely defined by how much real-world inspiration it takes. Its hyper-realism is throughout the entire game, and its art style is reminiscent of that. This look for Sonic and the rest of his friends is so iconic because this is the only game to use this art style, and that's exactly why it holds such a distinct identity. But this is for a very specific take on Sonic that is probably better lost to time. I love it, but I feel even though it's trying to take the adventure look and flesh it out, it went a bit too far and lost all of the pop that the adventure series had. Now before we get to Unleashed, let's talk about some more interesting stuff. Spin-offs and handhelds. The art of the Sonic Advance series is probably just as iconic as Sonic Adventure 1's promotional artwork. The Sonic Advance trilogy brought back the 2D art as the primary form of advertisement because of the inherent simplicity of these titles. And that's how I feel this art perfectly portrays the identity of the Advance games. The artwork is sleek with the new modern design aesthetic, but not so radically stylized as the adventure artwork. The poses are far simpler, and very similar to that of the classic titles, which helps sell the simplicity of the game. The return to 2D roots, that's what this artwork is supposed to represent, a simple yet fantastic visual identity to sell the spiritual sequel to the classics. Then there's Sonic Battle. Sonic Battle has easily one of the most distinct art styles in the entire series. The rough straight lines that make up the line art, as well as the jagged shading, lends these character portraits to feel like one of a kind. I feel this style was most likely chosen because this is a fighting game and they wanted to showcase the pure power and toughness within the roster, and this look lends itself naturally to that, and unintentionally, I imagine it represents the rough pixel look of the game considering the sprites on the GBA hardware. Yes, the storybook games exist and are gorgeous Wii titles, but as far as Sonic goes, it's pretty standard stylistic safety post-06 as far as the promo art and renders go. Lastly for spin-offs, let's talk about one of my favorite games in the entire Sonic series. I'll try to make this as fast as I can because this art style captures everything that makes Sonic Riders so perfect. I've made a really beefy video about the game, so go check it out if you're unfamiliar with Riders because the art style says it all. This game is extreme. The clean, bold artwork and the hyper-stylized shading all comes together so perfectly with the futuristic aesthetic, and it folds into the game itself. Although the shading differs in the in-game graphics, they do their best to portray the 2D illustrations vibe because the art style of Riders, from its promo illustrations to the in-game graphics to that amazing opening cinematic, masterfully gives this game an identity all its own. And now we get to undoubtedly the best looking Sonic game of all time. Sonic Unleashed has one of the best styles in the entire series. The look of Sonic is a refined one that, although maybe standard and safe, is still sleek and well rendered in promotional material with dynamic and well laid out posing. The safer look complements the world around him, which is of course a fictitious version of our own, with cartoonishly proportioned humans that allow them to fit naturally side by side with Sonic and Chip, and most impressively, they even look natural next to Eggman. This game is Sonic's world adventure, and also the big last hurrah. With the context of this being Sega's last chance to save Sonic, the safe approach is understandable. But even so, the safer exterior is never the focus. Instead, it's an appealing outer layer that underneath the surface shows the depth Unleashed has to offer. This is the last true Sonic game to really have an artistic identity for the better. And that's because although safe, it finds a perfect balance between cartoony Sonic antics and human life and planet Earth, making it all blend together so seamlessly it's simply amazing. So, this is the turning point. Over the course of the video, I've done my best to explain what these many different art styles have done for their respective games. They all did their best to be unique in evolution, anything and everything to really give the respective game an identity all its own regardless of its place in the series. For better or worse, the franchise did whatever it wanted with its art direction until it kinda didn't have the choice anymore. The games of the post-Unleashed era, although gorgeous in their own right, have no real distinct artistic identity. Colors has a unique setting which makes up for its lack of a new art style, and that's frankly a good thing. The idea of switching styles every game is one I disagree with, so taking the Colors formula of switching up the setting is a great way to spice up the visuals without completely changing the visual identity. But over a decade since Sonic Colors, it's time for a serious switch up. One that Sega seemingly has no plans for. Yes, Sonic Boom happened, but never stylistically did anything unique, just changed the designs all around. Granted, those designs did get across a very Indiana Jones Sonic feel, but they were still stylistically quite stale. I think we're more than overdue for a serious stylistic shakeup that comes with better models, more distinct 2D art and 3D renders, and just an overall way to reinvigorate Sonic's appeal from an artistic perspective that gives the future an identity all its own. Whether that be on a game-to-game basis like the 2000s or an era-to-era basis like we've seen from Colors onward, I don't really know what the best option is. But what I do know is that I will always appreciate and love the fact that Sonic has had so many titles with such distinct tones, looks, and identities, all because of the willingness to adapt to what the game was and make it its own unique beast, artistically speaking. And that is why I will always emphasize the importance of style in Sonic.